The most asked question I get when I am teaching web development, working with students or whatever, is async and await. It is, for newer students, it is often the most confusing because it works differently than some other languages. In Rust, if you say .await, it'll execute the code at that moment. Whereas in here, it's not really clear when it executes. And what is synchronous and what is asynchronous at that moment. It's not entirely clear. So I'm going to do my best to explain async and await. Okay? So you could read through this, but let's just go through async and await. And I demonstrated a little bit in the last thing. So if I have something that is asynchronous, like const sleep equals something that returns a promise. Okay, so milliseconds, new promise, resolve, set timeout, resolve after milliseconds. Okay, so this is an asynchronous function because it returns a promise. Okay, I could say async right here, but it's kind of redundant because it's already returning a promise. So if I say there are two ways to create an asynchronous function. You can say const my function equals async this, okay, or you can say async function my function this, okay. Both of them, these do the same thing as const my other function equals return new promise res. Okay, and actually you should usually do a res reg. Okay, so if you throw an error inside of here, that's the same thing as saying reject. If you return something, it's doing the same thing as resolving. Okay, so if I say return 5 or 4, this is the same thing as saying res 4. Okay, it does the same thing. Okay, so that's asynchronous function. So I'm going to do a main function, const main equals async. Okay, the reason why I do like this kind of thing and execute it separately is because you can't use await in the global scope. So what is await? What is async? So async is just shorthand for an asynchronous function, or just is the term for an asynchronous function. It's something that returns a promise, okay? You can handle that promise in two different ways. You can say sleep 5 milliseconds dot then do something, okay? I could do something here. Or you can say const, or I could say await sleep 5 milliseconds, okay? And now I can do something here. Those two do the same exact thing with one difference, okay? The difference is await is in the same scope. So if I basically await in the same scope that I am working in, okay? Everything that you can do inside of an async function can be done inside of .then. But sometimes it's easier, and usually I find await to be easier because it's in the same scope. I don't have to do callbacks and stuff like that. So anyway, I am now waiting for 5 milliseconds, and then I'm going to console.log waited. Or I could say sleep 5.then console.log waited. So the difference between the two of these is this will wait 5 milliseconds and then log waited. This will wait 5 milliseconds and then will log waited. However, if I write something in here, console.log did not wait, this will log first before this, okay? Because this is waiting, and this is asynchronous. This is calling some asynchronous code. So that's the difference between await and .then. Is await uses is forcing the current scope to be synchronous, okay? Well, actually, it's not enforcing. The current scope is always synchronous. So it's just waiting for whatever's happening. The thing is, you cannot have an await outside or in a non-asynchronous area, right? So await expressions are only allowed within async functions and at the top levels of modules. So you have to say async in here in order for you to be allowed to use await. Okay, that is very important, which is why I can't say await right here. It will not work. Although it's not showing me an error, in Node.js, this is not allowed. It's weird because it's allowed in Deno, which is strange to me, but whatever. You cannot do that. The global scope must be synchronous. Okay, so just again making this clear. If you're using asynchronous code, and it's actually just good practice to create a main function and then call it, it allows you to have an await and be able to use it. So I showed you in the last video at the very end like how I like to use promise.all, but this is we're gonna look at a real world example by using the FS module, which you can use promises with. So, all right. Oh god, I hate this. FS uses a callback, and I really don't like it. But anyway, I hate callbacks. So in this code, excuse me, sorry. In this lesson, you'll be given a code editor to write your code, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, obviously. To execute your program, you'll type Node.js. Okay. In the code we provided, shows 3 ways of accomplishing the same task. First, callback functions. Second, uses native promise syntax. And the third uses async await. Don't worry about understanding async await. You already do. Okay. You haven't already typed node app.js. Okay. Node app.js. Okay. So, you can see this is the first sentence and this is the second sentence. And you can see we're just reading these 2 files. And this is just a, I don't know what this is. Really. FS already has promises. Okay, whatever. This is dumb. That's stupid. You can literally just go const promises equals require FS, because that is a part of the FS module. Like, I can literally, and you should see, oh, huh, they're using a really old version of FS right now. Wow. Okay, so they're not, just FYI, they are not teaching good stuff. Okay, whatever. They are teaching really old stuff right now. So anyway, now I'm gonna do check work. I gain like next to nothing, but let's read what's happening here. So here we use and we have these callback functions. So what it's doing right here is it's reading this file, and then once it's done reading that file, it's gonna do this. Okay, and then once that's done, it's gonna read this file. Okay, so this is the first sentence, this is the first sentence, this is the first second. Okay, so you can see that all of those are in line with each other. Oh, yeah, well, no dot. This shows no difference. Okay, whatever. So this is synchronous because we are waiting for the first file to be read and then waiting for the second file to be read and then logging the data. Okay? With this one, it's kind of the same concept. We're waiting for the first file, then we're waiting for the second file, and then we're logging the data. Okay? We could use promise.all and then pull both files out and then log them. That'd be better. But now we're gonna be doing the same thing. We're gonna be waiting for this one, then we're gonna be waiting for that one, and then we're gonna log both. All 3 of these suck, in my opinion. One, this callback sucks. I hate callbacks. Callbacks are the worst. With the exception of event listeners. Event listeners are the only time where you should use callbacks. But like things like this, callbacks just suck. And if I'm using a package that forces you to use callbacks, I write a wrapper class and just turn everything into promises. All 3 of these suck because they're all synchronous. It waits for the first file to be read and then waits for the second file to be read. in my opinion, that's really bad code. It should execute both in parallel and then pull the data from them. It's better that way. Oh, remember how I said you have async function and you call it later when I was talking about the main thing? Same thing. They did the same thing here. All right. So now that you understand async await, we're going to just kind of brush right through these. So use write functions, handle asynchronous actions. Yep. Basically, it's a function that returns a promise. And if you, you can see return your promise, resolve. You can clearly see that it's the same thing as async function return 0 or return not 0, right? It's the same concept, okay? Node app.js, okay, and then check work. Write an async function with async, const with async equals async, and then I'm going to say num equals 0 question mark 0 or not 0. Okay, that's how I would write that function. Let's check the work. Great. And now let's run it again. Oh, I need to call it with async. And we'll do 5. Check work. Okay. And we'll run it. Okay, with constructed promise resolve to 0. Oh, yeah. And then I'm going to just console log that. I'll just copy that, run it. Okay. There we go. So now you can see it does the same thing, okay? These two things are doing the exact same thing. This is very verbose. I like to write simpler. Well, it may not even be simpler. These actually probably behind the scenes are doing pretty much the same thing. But I just like to write more condensed code. This is just harder to read, in my opinion. So, all right. Next, the await operator. All it does is waits for asynchronous code to happen. So in the provided code, we require the function brainstorm dinner. This function expects no arguments and blah, 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 blah. Look at the native promise dinner right there. Great. Take a moment to understand a function. It's not necessary to execute that, but if you would like to, check out the hint for guidance. Okay, so what are we actually doing? Oh, okay, didn't tell us to do anything. Fill the body announce dinner so that it has the same functionality as native promise dinner. Okay, okay, so const result equals await brainstorm dinner. Okay, notice how we're inside of an asynchronous function, so we can use await. Okay, const await equals await brainstorm dinner, and then I'm just going to console.log this. I'm going to make sure that's called meal. And then I'm going to format it a little bit so it looks a little nicer. Whoops. There. Now, node app.js. Actually, I don't even want to do that. So, when you're ready, check your work. Announce dinner. Node app.js. Salad. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. So, now we have that. Fantastic. In the terminal, I already did, dude. Okay, so as you can see, we are waiting for this to happen, and then you can see I'm going to make blank for dinner. Okay, and so it resolves. Okay, so these two things do the exact same thing, and I can show you by just copying and pasting that there and running the function again. Okay, and as you can see, they both of these functions do exactly the same thing. Okay, so let's keep going. Writing asynchronous functions. I think we can get this done pretty quickly. So take a look at the provided code. We record them shop for beans. Let's look at shop for beans. Okay, returns a promise. Great. Doesn't do anything. This is gonna be confused because that's a value. That's a promise. So execute app is working as intended. It is not. It's going to say promise. Yeah, object promise. It's going to be confused. So clearly it does not work. Okay. So now we have that. Let's refactor it. So we need to make sure that this is an asynchronous function. So async function and then await. Now I'm going to run it. It works. Great. It works. Cool. Handling dependent promises. I don't know what this is, so that's the basics of async await. We will get into whatever this is in the next video. So async await is basically you're creating an asynchronous function that returns a promise. It's a function that returns a promise. That's all it is. Okay. And then the await keyword has to happen inside of another asynchronous function, and all it does is waits for that promise to be over and then returns whatever it resolves with. Okay? And if it fails, if there is if the promise is rejected or there's an error inside of the code, it will throw an error. And it's going to be called an unhandled promise rejection or something like that. So I have a way of getting around that because I like something really specific. It's like my favorite thing in the world with coding. You'll see when we get into error handling. It's so cool and I love it. But yeah, basically asynchronous function is just a function that returns the promise, and it just waits for that promise to be done and returns with whatever it resolves, and it has to be done inside of another asynchronous function. Okay? If you're getting errors, you probably have, if you're getting like await errors, you probably are not inside of an asynchronous function. All right.